Hey everyone, Leticia here. Happy Friday. And oh my goodness, can you believe we are already at the weekend before Christmas weekend. So I'm going to take this opportunity to wish you guys a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. This will be my last webinar for 2023. I will see you live in the new year. In the meantime, maybe I'll upload a couple more videos. I'm quite behind with my video uploads on YouTube. Thank you guys for your patience. And anyway, my friends, I know it's getting cold up there in the Northern Hemisphere. Hi to all my Canadian friends and also to those of you in different parts of the US and maybe even some of you in colder regions of Mexico. The weather continues to be beautiful here in Playa del Carmen and the whole Riviera Maya. So, my friends, this is a topic that I've been wanting to address for a while. And wanted to tell you a little bit about the buying process for foreigners in Mexico because it may be a bit different than where you live, where you may have bought before. So, without further ado, I did prepare some slides for you. So, thank you for tuning in. Hi to all of you who are joining live, and also to those who may be watching this after the fact. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and we'll get right into it, mis amigos. Oh, that's not where I go. Yeah, share. Okay, and let's try here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this. I trust that you can. Okay, my friends, so I'm going to talk about, and here in Playa del Carmen, the Tulum region, all over the Riviera Maya, we have a lot of pre-construction properties. Here in Mexico, they're called preventa. So these are, in other parts of the world, they're called off-plan. So somebody from England told me off-plan. I didn't know what that meant. And then I understood that that meant pre-construction. That meant the property that is being offered for sale before it's actually been built. And then we're going to talk about with moving ready properties and what the differences are there. Okay. And so I'm going to start with pre-construction because that is actually the majority of inventory in this area. It is such a new and market that, believe it or not, many properties get sold in the pre-construction phase. So by the time a property is fully built, the most desirable projects, the projects from top developers, the projects that are well priced, well located, a lot of times get sold in the pre-construction process, in the pre-construction phase. I will first talk about that, and then we'll go into what is different when you're buying a moving ready property. Okay, so typically, if you find a development that you like, and hopefully you guys, I hope this is big enough. Let me see if I can make this any bigger. There you go. Hopefully that's better. So if you find a development that you like and you want to reserve a unit, and by the way, that's one of the advantages when you buy something in pre-construction, you have more choices of units because, as mentioned, with the desirable projects, by the time a building is already built, you're not going to have as much choice of units. You may get the units that nobody wanted, or in that case, you may be looking at resale, move-in ready properties, and then you'll have your selection there. So when it comes to pre-construction, the standard process is that the buyer puts down a refundable deposit. At that time, you make an offer. Now, typically, there is a price list provided, and what makes the difference is how high of a down payment you're able to put. Usually, the higher the down payment, the more of a discount the developer is able to give the client. So a standard discount would be about, the minimum down payment required typically with most projects in this area is 30%. There are some developers that are getting more creative or more generous with their down payment options. They allow you to spread it out for longer, but those are the exception to the rule. By and large, you're usually looking at 30% down payment. And from there, if a client is able to put down a 50% down payment, usually you can expect to negotiate about 3% of the buying price. If you're able to do 80%, some developers would give you as much as 6% or even higher of a discount. Okay. Now, at the time of you put in an offer on the unit of your choice, there's not a lot of flexibility on the price. Now, if a client is buying multiple units, usually you can expect that you'll get a discount, some amount of a discount, whether it's 3%, sometimes even more. Okay. And then with your offer, and it can be either at the time of submitting the offer or once it gets accepted, you would be depositing, most developers will expect 5 to 10,000 US, and that you can either do directly to the developer's account or you can do to an escrow account. We can talk about that shortly. Some developers are making it even easier for clients. They're telling you, listen, with even $1,000, you can reserve a unit. If you change your mind for whatever reason in 2 weeks, you can we'll give you your deposit back. And any serious developer or sales agency will honor that commitment because they're not in here. They're not in the business of collecting people's reservation deposits. They're in the business of selling those units, and what they want to do is sell those units. Okay. Now, after 2 weeks, now, what happens once you've made this reservation deposit? You will be asked for some information, your passport, address info. The developer's representative, well, legal representative, will start preparing a draft agreement, and it's something called a promise to purchase agreement. That will then be the official contract that commits both parties. Now, you as a buyer will have some time to review this agreement. Initially, you'll be provided with a first draft. At this point in time, as my point there says, I strongly recommend that you do get your own lawyer that reviews the agreement. Most developers' agreements are not going to be written in your favor. So I've often seen cases where the penalties for non-delivery or delays for the developer are lower than what happens if you delay on a payment. Okay. Usually after that initial deposit, so let's say you have some time to review the agreement. Payment plan. So since we're talking about a pre-construction property, the developer may have, for example, a 30, 50, 20 payment plan where the 30% is the initial down payment, 50% of payments will be made during the construction, and the final 20% gets paid on delivery. That's just one example. Some developers are getting even more generous, and they will even offer something called 30/70, meaning that you only pay an initial 30% and then the final 70% will be paid on delivery. What that allows a client to do is perhaps use a mortgage at the time that the property is ready, because a mortgage can only be applied on a property that is already built and it has what's known as the condo regimen. We'll talk about that. So yeah, so you, in the offer letter, you tell the developer how you'd like to make the payments. They agree to that, and then all of that information gets put into the promise to purchase agreement. And again, you have an opportunity to have the agreement reviewed once both parties feel comfortable with the wording of the agreement. Oh yeah, so here's where I'm talking about the process. So the buyer pays the down payment. The typically 30%, but in some cases, especially if you want to take advantage of some discounts, you can offer to pay a larger down payment and get a corresponding discount. Okay. And once the agreement gets reviewed and both parties are happy with the wording of the promise to purchase agreement, you as the buyer sign the agreement, the developer representative also signs the agreement. And at that point in time, you transfer the down payment funds to the developer. Once this promise to purchase agreement is signed, this is a legal document. It is a legally binding contract on both parties. There's no going back. Well, if you decide as a buyer to back out for any reason, there are consequences, there are penalties specified in the contract. So definitely good idea to have this agreement reviewed, and so you feel very comfortable with what you're signing. Okay. And so the process continues. Typically, the developer will provide you with construction updates during the construction process, so you know that the building is being built and so on. Okay, and if all goes according to plan, the building will be ready close to your scheduled delivery date. Now, one thing you should be aware of, and this I'm sure it's no different in other countries, um, developers will usually have a grace period, and this grace period in terms of the delivery with no penalties. Before COVID, this grace period used to be 3 months. That was the standard. But after COVID, material delays, things like that happened. Most developers have gone to 6 month grace periods. And again, that's a grace period means a period when the developer still has time to complete the project, the construction, without incurring any penalties for late delivery. Okay. Now, after the grace period is completed, after the grace period completes there, and if they're still late, then there are penalties usually specified in the agreement, but not usually, but always there will be some level of penalty. And which is why it's always a good idea to leave some money to be paid at the end upon delivery, upon the physical delivery of the unit. Now, sometimes if you know for sure that you're going to be, and we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about what happens at delivery. So in the final stages of construction, the developer applies for what's known as the condo regimen. So initially, my friends, when it comes to pre-construction properties, initially there's only one plot of land. It's owned by the developer. Now, of course, your lawyer that you hire, in addition to checking the wording of the agreement, they also check the identity of the developer. They check that they are the rightful owner of that land. So they check all the paperwork, make sure there's no debt on the land, or they that's part of the due diligence that a lawyer will do for you at the time of signing the agreement, okay? Or before you sign the agreement. Now, so initially there's only one plot of land. When the building is in the final stages of completion, the developer will apply for something called termination of work permit. And then once that is granted by the municipality, they then apply for the condo regimen. What this does is it makes that each condo in the building now has an individual property title. Okay, so once that happens, then you can move to the final stage of the process, which here in Spanish we call escrituración. We can, in English, I think you would call it the deed signing. So only once the building has the condo regimen, you can actually go and get the official property title in your name. And at that point in time, you and the developer go to a notary's office. And by the way, this is the only part of the process that you literally need to be physically present in Mexico for, the signing of the deed. Everything I shared before, you could do remotely. You could choose a project remotely. Someone like myself and other wonderful people working in real estate in this area can help you with that. But essentially, the last stage of the process, which is the signing of the deed, that you actually have to be physically in Mexico for. Sometimes there are, if you know for sure that you cannot be physically in Mexico, you could grant somebody a power of attorney to sign for you. I've done that for at least some of my clients. But more often than not, the buyer and the seller show up at a notary's office. Now, a notary, my friends, I may have shared this with you before, is a neutral third party. In Canada, I know we have the buyer side lawyer and the seller lawyer. Here in Mexico, in order for a property to get properly registered in the public record, we need a notary. And a notary in Mexico is a lawyer that has at least 5 years of experience. They carry special licensing, special insurance. Not every lawyer can call themselves a notary, but a notary is absolutely required to make sure that your property title is legit and that it gets properly registered in the public record. So a notary will put their seal on your property title, on the deed, and that's when the deal officially gets completed. Okay. Now, in some cases, let's say that, because what typically happens is that the physical completion of the building will happen before the developer gets this condo regimen from the city. And there are, we're in Mexico, government paperwork. You tell me one country, maybe there are some countries in the world where government paperwork moves quickly. I'll say Mexico is not one of them generally. So it can be a multi-month process. Now, developers that know about this will typically apply as soon as possible for the condo regimen so that the building completion and the date that they actually get the condo regimen are close enough together. But it's not always the case. Typically, there is a bit of time delay in between the physical delivery and the condo regimen being issued. So in those cases, you as the buyer can negotiate with the developer that they give you physical possession of the unit. Sometimes with a 90% payment to the developer, you say, listen, I want to start enjoying my unit. I want to put it out for rent. Most developers are open to that. Some developers, especially the big boys, will say, well, we've already done our job. Now it's in the hands of the city. We've already submitted the paperwork. We want payment 100% if you want to take possession. So it will be up to you. And some will actually, it depends on the provisions of your agreement. If you are a client where you know that you are going to be needing a mortgage to complete your purchase, then it's a good idea to negotiate that the final payment is done at the signing of the escritura, of the signing of the property title, because only with your own individual property title, you'll actually be able to apply a mortgage on that individually titled property. Prior to that, you cannot apply a mortgage. So what I would suggest to people, if you know for sure that you're going to be needing external financing to complete your purchase, good idea. And I'm not talking about you getting, Our last webinar talked about financing options for foreigners. A lot of foreigners are able to access financing back home via, for example, a home equity line of credit. That's not the type of mortgage I'm talking about. I'm talking more about the case where you're going to be accessing third-party financing through either a Mexican mortgage provider or perhaps a U.S. mortgage provider. And again, if you are curious about those things, I will link to my last week's webinar that talks about financing options. Um, if you're using your own financing that is not linked to your Mexico property, that's not going to be an issue. Like you could then liquidate the funds owing without the need for the property to already have the condo regimen. Okay, but I'm talking about cases. I hope this is not getting too confusing for you, my friends. In cases where you are relying on external third-party financing, what you want to ideally put in the agreement is that the last amount owing will be paid at the time of the signing of the deed, with the option to take possession sooner by giving a 90 or even 100% payment, just in case you come into some money or you're able to access financing back home and you don't need that third-party mortgage. Okay. So finally, my friends, let's talk about the closing process. Again, we actually already spoke about that. Now, let's talk about the closing costs. Okay. So like I said, you would meet at the notary's office for the closing. Now, what happens at the time of closing? There are some closing costs required. And by the way, that's a beautiful building we have here in Playa del Carmen. It's called Ana Playa. We have many beautiful buildings in Playa. What can I say? So, and all over the Riviera Maya, absolutely beautiful. Tulum is also becoming very beautiful. So, closing costs typically 6.5% to 7%. Now, out of that, and I thought initially that this was just in the Riviera Maya. Nope, not the case. It's all over Mexico. When you're buying, it's a 3%. In Canada, we would call it land transfer tax. Here they call it something else, but it is a tax that goes directly to the government. The remaining fees go to the notary. Some of it covers the notary's honorariums for helping you with the entire closing process. And then in addition to that, you may have, well, I would definitely strongly suggest that you hire your own lawyer to handhold you through the entire process. And you can expect to pay about $2,000 US for a lawyer to handhold you from A to Z through the entire process. Okay. So 6.5, 7%, maybe even up to 8%. That would be about the highest you can expect. I realize that's higher than in some areas. However, one good thing about this area is that our ongoing property taxes are extremely low. So to give you an idea, for a $300,000 property, your annual property taxes are probably going to be around 350 US dollars per year. Okay, just to give you, and that's pretty much the percentage that you can expect in general. Okay, now I want to make a special note about people buying in coastal areas such as the Riviera Maya, where I am located. You might have heard, and this thing is something that causes so much confusion for people, because people say, "Oh, I heard that you're not allowed to own property in Mexico. I heard you're not allowed to buy in Mexico." Meanwhile, like, I'm here in Playa del Carmen, and most of the beautiful real estate, this new real estate that's being bought here, is being bought by foreigners, whether it's Americans, Canadians, Western Europeans. We do definitely have Mexicans that are also buying here. So let me just clarify for you what happens when you're buying property. And this provision only applies when you're buying property in the so-called restricted zone within 50 kilometers of the coast or within 100 kilometers from Mexico's borders. Again, this is actually, when it comes to the Riviera Maya, we fall within that restricted zone, which is 50 kilometers from the coast. Okay. And this has to do with the Mexican Constitution of 1913, my friends. I explained this in a previous video, but I'll explain it again. When Mexico lost a bunch of land to the United States, they had lost Texas, they lost part of California. So the Mexican government at the time said, "Oh my goodness, we need to protect our borders." So they put it in their constitution that foreigners were not allowed to own in the border areas of Mexico. Okay. Now, some 60 years of Mexican government later, they realized that, well, this provision of our constitution is really affecting foreign investment in the country. Of course, the coastal areas of any country are the most desirable. That's where foreigners would like to buy, and of course, and then it was leading to some gray zone areas. People were still buying properties. Foreigners were still buying, but they were using a Mexican name and all this legal trickery. So they said, okay, no more craziness. So 1973. they actually said, okay, we need to come up with a way for foreigners to be able to buy in these desirable coastal areas, but at the same time, we can go against our constitution. So what they did, my friends, is they came up with a pass-through structure. They empowered the Mexican banks. They figured, okay, there is enough trust in the banking system. We're going to empower Mexican banks to act as a fiduciary holder of this pass-through structure, which in Spanish is called the fideicomiso. Here in English, we would just call it the bank trust. So essentially what happens, you as the foreign buyer become the beneficial owner of this trust. The trust is good for 50 years. It's renewable in perpetuity. There is an initial setup cost for this trust. As you can see there, it's a cost of about 2,200 US. Lately, those are the quotes I'm getting, US. And that covers you for the first year of the structure's life. Now, you as the foreign buyer have the exact same rights as any Mexican. You can sell your property. You can heir it to your children. You can rent it out. And let me see if I put that in there. Yeah, same ownership rights, and you may actually be able to save on capital gains taxes. We do have capital gains tax in Mexico. Again, it's not called that. I think they call it impuesto sobre la renta, but it seems that's a generic tax name that they use for a few different taxes. In any case, um, it would allow you to save on taxes. You would have to be a resident at that point in time. You'd need to have a Mexican tax ID, but something that would help you in the future. Like this sort of ownership structure would help you. The alternative is to set up a Mexican corporation. Um, Again, potentially higher taxes on an ongoing basis, and there is no capital gains exemption with that form of ownership. Generally, if you're a foreigner that's just buying one vacation property or even a couple of condos here, unless you're planning to get into active business here like development, by and large, the fideicomiso structure is what most foreigners use to buy their Mexican property. Okay, again, if you're gonna get into maybe a much larger portfolio, but even then, maybe you're better off setting up separate entities. That's something that you can discuss with your lawyer at the time of acquiring your properties. Okay, so okay, my friends. So we talked about the pre-construction process. Hopefully that's clear for you guys. The moving ready, when it comes to moving ready properties, such as this gorgeous property that I have a picture of here. This is a 2-bedroom we have available in Playa Ocean View unit. Very beautiful. Okay, when it comes to moving ready properties, it's very similar in that you as the buyer would reserve a unit with a refundable security deposit, typically refundable for the first 14 days. That gives you enough time, gives you and your lawyer enough time to review the paperwork. Okay. Now, as I mentioned here, in the case of resale properties, it is common to use an escrow account for all payments. Now, when it comes to the pre-construction properties, especially where you're making payments during the construction process, the payments will typically go directly to the developer because they need those funds to keep building the building in most cases. Okay. Now, some developers will access external financing or what have you, but in any case, with most developers, you're going to be making payments directly to them. You can still choose to use an escrow account. It's up to you, in which case the escrow agent releases the funds, the down payment funds to the developer. Now, it's a lot more common to see escrow accounts being used for resale transactions. So if you're buying from a private seller, now in Canada, I cannot speak for the US, but I'm pretty sure it's the same. You don't send money directly to the seller's account until the transaction, the funds get released at the end once all the paperwork has been signed. In Mexico, again, for resale transactions, we do have a couple of law firms, well, more than a couple, but 2 in particular that will offer insured escrow accounts. So this is a third party law firm account where your funds will go instead of going directly to the seller. And typically, as I mentioned, with developers, when you're buying in pre-construction, typically it's a 30% down payment. With resale transactions, more often than not, we see a 10% down payment being put into escrow. And then the balance of the funds, the whole 90%, gets released upon the signing of the deed. And in this case, one thing I forgot to mention, if you're buying in this area, mis amigos, if you're buying in the Riviera Maya area and you need to set up a fideicomiso, it takes about, and I think I had it on one of my slides, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to set up this structure. So in the case of a pre-construction property, you're not going to have to worry about the closing costs and the setting up of the fideicomiso until the property has what's called the condo regimen. Only then you can proceed to the closing process. When it comes to a move-in ready property that already has the condo regimen, the whole process is accelerated. But if you're buying in this coastal area, we're still talking usually about a 4 to 6%, 4 to 6 week period during which time the fideicomiso is being set up, and then you go to closing with the seller, and at that point in time you deposit, before going to signing, you as the buyer deposit the remaining 90% into escrow. You'll also likely be asked by your law firm, by the escrow agent, to deposit all the closing costs, and they will use those to make the payment to the notary, both the notary's fees and the taxes that are due, the 6.5 to 7% that I was mentioning to you guys. Okay. So yeah, the closing process, same as with pre-construction, except it's usually accelerated. That, by the way, my friends, is another beautiful property we have here in Playa called Ipana. You might have heard me speak about it. Okay. So when it comes to resale properties and moving ready properties, especially resale properties, all the funds get released to the seller upon the signing of the escritura, or the property deed. Okay. And as mentioned here, if you as the buyer are using a mortgage, the mortgage commitment document gets signed at the same time as the title document. Exactly. And the mortgage provider releases the funds to the seller. Okay. Well, yeah, my friends. So that's about it. I'm gonna say thanks. Okay. Let me see if any of you have had any. Well, I'm gonna put my contact info up there. If any of you are interested in acquiring either an investment or a lifestyle property, perhaps a vacation home in this beautiful area. I'm not sure what happened with those NG over there, but that's the info right here. You can reach me at info@freedomplaya.com or via WhatsApp at that phone number, or you can text me as well. I'm gonna stop sharing now. Hopefully you guys have been able to see everything. Let me go back into yeah, my friends, it's always a joy here. Let me see if there have been any questions. Oh my goodness, what is going on? I hope you guys can see me. Okay, I'm not sure what happened. Hope you guys can see me. Thank you very much for the feedback. Somebody says, good stuff. Thank you very much, amigo. Oh, thank you very much, amigos. Well, thank you, my friends. Have a great rest of your weekend. I'm not sure. I was having some issues with StreamYard. Hopefully, you guys can still see me. All right. Woo. Okay. Well, have a great rest of your weekend. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. And see you soon, mis amigos. Bye for now.